For tens of thousands of years, human beings live through a world where temperatures can plunge far below anything most people today experience. Enormous glaciers lock up vast amounts of water, and entire landscapes change within a few generations. Yet people do not merely survive. They travel, raise children, make art, hunt, gather, trade, argue, laugh, and somehow keep going while the planet repeatedly rearranges itself around them. You stand now on the edge of that world. The air feels sharper than modern winter air, dry enough to sting the inside of your nose, under your feet. Frozen soil crunches with each step. Far away, a herd moves across a pale plain, dark shapes passing beneath a low grey sky. There are no supermarkets, no central heating, and absolutely no convenient weather app politely warning you that tonight might be unpleasant. So, before you get comfortable, and take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and tell me where you are listening from, along with your local time. It is always strangely comforting to imagine people settling down for the night in different corners of the world. Now, dim the lights, and allow the frozen landscape to come quietly into focus. The first thing to understand is that the Ice Age is not simply one endless winter. Your mind might naturally picture a planet buried beneath snow, with woolly mammoths wandering around while unfortunate humans spend every waking hour shivering beside a fire. The reality is more complicated, and fortunately for your imaginary toes, somewhat less uniformly frozen. The period usually called the last Ice Age contains enormous shifts in climate. Cold phases come and go. Temperatures rise, fall, and rise again. Glaciers advance across parts of the northern continents, then retreat. Rainfall patterns change. Grasslands spread into places that later become forests. Rivers alter course. Coastlines move as water becomes trapped in vast ice sheets. So if you are an ancient human trying to survive, the problem is not merely cold, the problem is unpredictability. You wake one generation in a valley rich with grazing animals, and your grandchildren may find the same region becoming drier, colder, or covered in different vegetation. Survival depends on noticing those changes early enough to respond. There's something almost unsettling about the scale of it. Imagine standing beneath a sky with no aircraft trails, no distant road noise, and no electric glow on the horizon. The wind moves across open grass and low shrubs. You smell damp earth beneath patches of snow, animal dung, smoke clinging to clothing, perhaps crushed herbs carried back from a gathering trip. The landscape feels empty by modern standards, but it is not empty. Across Eurasia, human groups occupy environments ranging from relatively mild southern refuges to bitter northern plains. In Africa, where humanity has already lived for a very long time, communities face their own cycles of drought, rainfall, shifting grasslands, and changing lakes. Ice Age survival is global, although the challenges look different depending on where you stand. Records preserved in ancient sediments confirm that climate can change remarkably quickly during parts of this period. Layers of ice and lake deposits reveal sudden temperature shifts, sometimes occurring over decades rather than thousands of years. For a family living through such a change, nobody announces that a new climatic phase has begun. There is no dramatic trumpet. You simply notice that familiar animals arrive later. A stream freezes sooner. Certain plants become harder to find. Snow remains on shaded ground longer than your parents remember. Little observations accumulate until somebody eventually says, in whatever language your community speaks, that perhaps it would be sensible to move. And moving is one of humanity's greatest Ice Age advantages. You're not tied permanently to a single farm, because agriculture does not yet dominate your life. You do not own a stone house filled with heavy furniture that requires 6 friends and a deeply regrettable afternoon to relocate. Most of what your group possesses can be carried. That mobility allows people to respond to changing environments. If herds shift, you may shift with them. If water becomes scarce, you search for another river or spring. If winter conditions worsen in one region, you may move toward a more protected valley, a coast, or a lower elevation. This does not mean people wander randomly. Far from it. The landscape becomes a map held in memory. You know where fresh water lies. You remember where stones suitable for tools can be found. You know which valley catches less wind and which ridge gives a useful view of migrating animals. Older members of the group may carry decades of such knowledge. Their memories become a form of survival technology. A grandmother who remembers where edible roots grow during a dry year may be just as valuable as a strong hunter. A grandfather who recognizes the signs of an approaching storm may prevent an entire group from being caught in exposed terrain. This is not particularly glamorous, which is probably why films prefer charging mammoths. But quiet knowledge keeps people alive. You continue walking across the cold plain. The ground beneath you is not necessarily covered by thick snow. In many regions near the great ice sheets, the environment resembles cold, dry grassland often called mammoth steppe. Grasses and hardy plants spread across huge distances. Trees can be scarce because cold temperatures, dry conditions, and strong winds make forests difficult to maintain. To modern eyes, such landscapes might appear bleak. To large grazing animals, they can be extremely productive. Reindeer, horses, bison, mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, and other species move through these open regions, depending on place and period, and where animals go, humans pay attention. Oddly enough, one of the strangest features of the Ice Age world is that some regions now associated with dense forests once support vast open plains instead. Places that today feel green and enclosed can once feel more like windswept steppe. You might stand in what is now northern Europe and see a horizon with surprisingly few trees. The wind has a clear path to your face. Convenient. Nature, apparently, decides you have not been cold enough. Still, humans are adaptable. Your body itself carries traces of adaptation, although culture does much of the heavy lifting. People learn how to organize daily life around temperature, daylight, animal movements, and local geography. This does not require some mystical instinct lost to modern humanity. It requires attention. You notice cloud formations. You study tracks. You recognize where snow is crusted over and where it remains soft. You know whether a river crossing is safe. You know which direction the wind usually blows through a valley. You learn these things from people older than you, just as children today learn how to cross a road or use a phone. Knowledge passes through conversation, demonstration, imitation, stories, gestures, and repeated experience. A child growing up in this environment learns survival almost from birth. The world is the classroom. There are, admittedly, fewer comfortable chairs. Scholars still argue whether the harshest climatic periods force human populations into a small number of refuges, or whether some communities manage to remain surprisingly far north through severe cold phases. Archaeological evidence is incomplete. Sites disappear beneath later sediments. Rivers erode them. Glaciers destroy them. Sea levels rise and cover ancient coastlines. So the map of human occupation that archaeologists reconstruct today contains enormous gaps. A campsite used for a few weeks 40,000 years ago may leave behind only scattered stone flakes, animal bones, charcoal, or stains in the soil. From those tiny traces, researchers try to reconstruct entire lives. It's a little like finding 3 crumbs beneath a sofa and attempting to determine the complete dinner menu. Yet patterns emerge. People repeatedly choose locations that offer several advantages at once. A sheltered spot may reduce exposure to wind. Nearby water provides drinking and attracts animals. High ground allows you to watch the surrounding country. Rock outcrops provide raw material for tools. A narrow valley may funnel migrating herds. Good survival often begins with simply being in the right place. You can feel why, as evening approaches, The temperature drops quickly once the weak sun sinks lower. Cold air collects in depressions. Wind strengthens across exposed ridges. Your fingers begin to stiffen. Your face feels numb around the cheeks. Suddenly geography is no longer an abstract subject. A few meters of elevation, a wall of rock, or a stand of shrubs can make the difference between a tolerable night and a miserable one. Ancient humans understand these tiny differences because they experience them constantly. They do not conquer the Ice Age by overpowering nature. They survive by reading it. That distinction matters. Modern stories sometimes present prehistoric humans as heroic figures battling a hostile wilderness, but the relationship is more subtle. You do not defeat winter. You adjust to it. You do not command migrating animals. You anticipate them. You do not prevent drought. You remember another source of water. There is a quiet humility in this kind of survival. Human intelligence works not because it makes the environment obedient, but because it allows people to change their behavior faster than many environmental pressures can change them. A curious footnote appears in the evidence from several Ice Age sites. People sometimes transport stone over surprisingly long distances. A particular type of flint or volcanic rock may turn up far from its natural source. That tells you something important. Either people themselves travel widely, or materials pass between groups through exchange networks. Both possibilities suggest that Ice Age humans live in connected social worlds, rather than isolated little bands waiting nervously for the next snowstorm. Information may travel along those connections too, where animals are moving, where water remains available, which valleys are dangerous, where good stone can be collected. A conversation between two groups might carry knowledge that later saves lives. You can almost hear such exchanges beside a fire, voices low, hands gesturing toward distant hills. There is laughter as well. There must be. Human beings do not stop being human simply because the climate is inconvenient. Someone tells stories badly, someone complains, someone exaggerates the size of an animal seen 3 days earlier. A child asks the same question several times. An older relative pretends not to hear. The Ice Age is dramatic when viewed across thousands of years. But for the people living inside it, life is still made of ordinary mornings and evenings. You wake, you look at the sky, you check the wind, you listen, then you decide what the day allows. Perhaps that is the first great secret of Ice Age survival. Not strength, not fearlessness, not some legendary ability to endure freezing temperatures with cheerful prehistoric stoicism. Flexibility. You change plans. You remember. You watch other people. You share information. You move when staying becomes dangerous. As darkness settles across the plain, distant animal calls fade into the wind. The enormous sky deepens from grey to blue-black, and the temperature continues its patient descent. You're still here. Not because the world becomes easy, but because humans become extraordinarily good at noticing what the world is doing. And tonight, beneath that vast, cold sky, noticing is enough. The wind presses against the edge of camp with a persistence that feels almost personal. You crouch near a low fire while sparks rise into the dark and vanish. The heat reaches your hands first, then your face, while your back remains stubbornly cold. This is one of the small frustrations of prehistoric comfort. Warm one side, rotate, warm the other, repeat until sleep or daylight arrives. Fire is not simply pleasant here. It changes the mathematics of survival. Records confirm that humans and earlier human relatives used fire long before the coldest phases of the last ice age. By the time people occupy some of the harshest environments of Eurasia, controlling flame is already an old and deeply important skill. You use fire to warm yourself, cook food, illuminate darkness, discourage predators, dry damp materials, harden certain wooden tools, and transform a patch of hostile ground into something that feels almost domestic. That last part matters more than it first appears. A fire creates a centre, people gather around it, children remain close, food passes from hand to hand, tools are repaired, stories unfold. Arguments probably unfold too, because apparently humanity develops that technology very early. Yet making a fire in an Ice Age environment is not as effortless as striking a modern match. Fuel must be found. Dry material must be protected. Wind must be managed. A flame must survive long enough to become useful. In a treeless region, fuel can become a serious problem. You scan the ground for anything that burns. Twigs, shrubs, dry grasses, old wood carried by rivers, animal bone, even dried dung may become valuable where timber is scarce. Oddly enough, archaeological experiments suggest that bones rich in fat can contribute to maintaining a fire, especially when combined with other fuels. They do not behave like neat little logs, of course. Prehistoric heating rarely has the elegance of a fireplace advertisement, but elegance is not the goal. Heat is. You learn to protect glowing embers because creating flame from nothing takes effort. If the fire survives through the night, morning becomes easier. A coal buried beneath ash may remain hot enough to revive. Someone wakes early, leans close, adds dry tinder, and blows gently. Smoke curls upward. A tiny glow brightens. Then the fire begins again. You can imagine how carefully people treat this living source of warmth. Not with worship necessarily, although fire certainly becomes important in many later belief systems, but with practical respect. Lose it during bad weather and you have created an irritating problem. Lose it while wet, exhausted, and exposed to bitter cold, and the problem becomes far more serious. Still, fire alone cannot protect you. Stand 10 steps away and the warmth disappears quickly. Wind steals heat from exposed skin. Snow or rain can soak clothing. Cold ground pulls warmth from your body while you sleep. So you need something else. Shelter. The popular image of Ice Age humans places everyone inside caves. It is understandable. Caves look ancient. They also save film crews the trouble of building prehistoric houses. But many people live far from caves, and even where caves exist, occupation may be occasional rather than permanent. You therefore become a builder. The materials vary with the landscape. Wooden poles can form frames. Branches can become walls. Hides can block wind. Stone can anchor coverings. Earth can provide insulation. In regions where large animal bones are abundant, bones may contribute to structures as well. Some archaeological sites in Eastern Europe preserve remarkable arrangements involving mammoth bones. Large skulls, jaws, tusks, and other bones appear in patterns that researchers interpret as parts of dwellings or windbreaks. You step toward one imagined structure now. It is not a palace. You will notice the absence of marble immediately. Instead, a low frame rises from the frozen ground. Heavy material helps secure the outer covering. The entrance stays narrow so less heat escapes. Inside, everything changes. The wind softens. Sound becomes muffled. The air smells of smoke, hides, earth, cooked meat, and human beings who have not encountered modern shampoo. You may decide not to breathe too deeply. Still, compared with the open plain, this space feels luxurious. The most important function of a shelter is often not to become hot. It is to prevent heat from leaving your body too quickly. That principle is simple and powerful. Block the wind. Keep yourself dry. Create a layer between your body and the frozen ground. Reduce the space that must be warmed. A small shelter can therefore outperform a grand one. Modern people often associate comfort with size. Ice Age physics has different opinions. A huge interior requires energy to warm. A low enclosed space traps body heat more effectively. Several people sleeping close together provide additional warmth. Privacy is sacrificed. Survival is pleased. Your sleeping place matters too. Lying directly on frozen soil is an excellent way to discover that the earth has absolutely no sympathy. So you create bedding, grass, reeds, branches, moss, hides, or other available materials can form an insulating layer. Archaeologists have found evidence at some prehistoric sites, suggesting that humans deliberately arrange plant material for sleeping surfaces. That is an ordinary act, but an important one. You gather soft material, you spread it, you add hides, you lie down. Suddenly you are not merely enduring the ground, you have modified it. This is humanity's great trick repeated again and again. Rather than waiting for your body to evolve thick fur, you alter the space around your body, colder outside, less cold inside. Problem reduced. One scandalous aside from the prehistoric household concerns smoke. A fire inside a shelter sounds wonderfully cozy until you remember ventilation. Smoke stings your eyes, it fills your lungs, it blackens surfaces, it clings to hair and hides. Without a chimney, controlling it becomes a daily nuisance. You need an opening large enough for smoke to escape, but not so large that winter enthusiastically enters with it. Position matters, wind direction matters, fire size matters. A poorly managed indoor fire can turn your warm refuge into a coughing chamber, so people learn by experience where to place hearths and how much fuel to burn. Archaeological hearths often appear as concentrations of charcoal, burned sediment, reddened earth, and heat, altered stone. These traces may look unimpressive in a museum photograph. In life, they represent hours of work and attention. You kneel beside the flames and realize that someone is always tending something. Fuel needs shifting, a hide needs drying, a child moves too close, food threatens to burn, a spark lands where it should not. Domestic life during the Ice Age is not passive. Warmth requires maintenance. The design of shelters also changes depending on how long you expect to stay. A camp used briefly may need little more than a windbreak. A place occupied for weeks or months rewards greater effort. You might dig slightly into the ground, you might reinforce a frame, you might store fuel nearby, you might repair the covering repeatedly. Mobility and construction have to balance each other. Build too little and you suffer. Build too much and you spend valuable energy creating a home you soon abandon. This produces a question archaeologists continue to wrestle with. No agreement has been reached on whether some elaborate Ice Age structures represent long-term residential dwellings, repeated seasonal camps, ceremonial spaces, or buildings serving several purposes over time. A circle of mammoth bones does not come with a label. Researchers examine wear patterns, hearths, stone tools, animal remains, spatial organization, and surrounding deposits. Still, ancient houses keep some secrets. You can understand why. Even a modern room says only so much once its furniture is removed. Now imagine trying to interpret one after 20,000 years of frost, erosion, burrowing animals, and shifting soil. The remarkable thing is that anything survives at all. Your attention returns to the fire. Fuel cracks softly. Someone turns a piece of meat near the heat. Another person works a wooden shaft, rotating it slowly, inspecting the surface. A child sleeps beneath a hide. Outside, wind moves loose snow across the ground. The difference between those two environments is only a thin wall and a little planning. Yet that difference is enough. Fire also allows people to extend the usable day. Without artificial light, darkness would otherwise limit activity. A flame makes evening productive. You can repair tools, prepare fibers, scrape hides, talk, teach, plan movements, study injuries, sort food. The working day stretches beyond sunset, although nobody is checking email at midnight, which must count as one prehistoric advantage. Light may also come from small lamps. In parts of Ice Age Europe, archaeologists discover stone lamps that may have burned animal fat with some form of wick. Picture the glow. It is weaker than a modern bulb, softer and more uneven. Shadows ripple across walls. The smell is oily. The flame trembles whenever someone moves. Still, it allows detailed tasks in darkness, in caves. Such lamps may make deeper spaces accessible for art or ritual activity. At camp, a similar principle turns darkness into usable time. Heat and light become tools. Shelter becomes technology, and neither requires advanced machinery. That is worth remembering. Ice Age survival depends repeatedly on combinations of simple things used intelligently. A hide by itself is just a hide. A pole is just a pole. A stone is just a stone. Arrange them correctly and you have a wind-resistant structure. Add bedding and a hearth, and you have a place where a child can sleep through freezing weather. There's nothing primitive about solving a difficult environmental problem with the materials available. You place a hand near the fire. The skin on your palm warms. Behind you, the shelter wall creaks as wind pushes against it. The covering shifts slightly but holds. You hear the faint scrape of someone settling into bedding. The world beyond the entrance remains cold enough to punish carelessness. Inside, warmth gathers slowly among bodies, hides, earth, and flame. You do not need to make winter disappear. You only need to create a small pocket where winter loses some of its power. That pocket may be no larger than a few sleeping places around a hearth, but within it, people rest. They recover energy. They care for children. They repair what has broken. They wake ready to face another cold day. Outside, the wind keeps moving. Inside, the fire lowers into red coals. The shelter grows quieter. Smoke curls upward through a carefully chosen opening, and beneath layers of hide and dry bedding, the frozen ground finally feels distant enough to ignore. Cold air reaches your skin in places you did not realize were exposed. A narrow gap near the wrist, a loose edge at the neck, the space between a boot and the lower leg. In warm weather, these are minor inconveniences. In an Ice Age winter, they become small arguments with physics, and physics is rarely in a generous mood. You pull the covering more tightly around your body. This is where survival becomes surprisingly sophisticated. Ancient humans do not endure severe cold simply because they are tougher than you. Human skin is still human skin. Fingers still lose feeling. Feet still become painfully cold. Wind still carries heat away from the body. The answer is clothing, not merely an animal hide tossed dramatically over one shoulder, which is the traditional prehistoric fashion statement in cartoons, but carefully shaped layers designed to trap warmth. The principle is familiar. Warm air held close to your body acts as insulation. Several fitted layers can work better than one heavy covering, because they reduce heat loss while allowing movement. For people living in cold environments, that matters enormously. A blanket is useful when you're sitting still. It becomes less convenient when you're following animals across rough terrain while carrying tools and possibly a tired child. You need garments that move with you. Records confirm that Ice Age humans work animal hides with specialized stone tools. Scrapers found at many archaeological sites are well suited to cleaning hides, removing tissue, and preparing skins for further treatment. This is not glamorous work. You kneel beside a stretched hide and pull a scraper repeatedly across the surface. The smell is strong. Your shoulders ache. Your hands become greasy. If prehistoric survival had a promotional brochure, this particular activity would probably appear in very small print. Yet the hide in front of you represents potential warmth. Processing it carefully can make the difference between stiff raw skin and something flexible enough to wear. Fresh hide does not automatically become comfortable clothing. Untreated skin can rot. It can dry into something hard and awkward. It can become unpleasantly heavy when wet. So you work it, you scrape it clean, you stretch it, You soften it repeatedly. Different communities likely use combinations of fat, smoke, physical working, and other methods depending on available materials and learned traditions. The exact recipes rarely survive archaeologically. What survives is the evidence that people possess the tools and skills to make hides useful. You can feel the finished material between your fingers. It is softer now, still thick, still carrying a faint animal scent, but flexible enough to bend. The next problem is shape. Wrapping a hide around your body provides some warmth, but fitted clothing does something far better. It closes gaps. It allows you to move. It protects vulnerable areas. To create fitted garments, you need ways to cut and join material. Stone blades can slice hides with remarkable efficiency. Then comes one of the quiet technological marvels of the Ice Age, the needle. Bone needles with carefully shaped points and drilled eyes appear in Upper Paleolithic archaeological contexts. They are small objects, easy to overlook, no enormous tusks, no dramatic spear points, no heroic cave paintings, just slender pieces of bone or ivory that fit between your fingers. Yet a needle can transform life in a cold climate. You push it through prepared hide. A thread follows. Perhaps the thread is made from animal sinew, plant fibre, or another strong material. You pull the seam tight, another stitch, then another. Slowly, separate pieces become a garment. A council decree obviously does not exist to tell you what prehistoric tailoring looks like, but surviving needles prove that some Ice Age people possess the ability to sew material with considerable precision. That opens possibilities. Sleeves, leg coverings, close-fitting upper garments, hoods, mittens, footwear, perhaps carefully tailored combinations of several pieces. You do not need to imagine everyone wearing identical brown tunics. Different environments, traditions, materials, seasons, and personal preferences almost certainly produce variety. Clothing can also communicate identity. A particular arrangement of beads might show membership in a community. A pattern may carry meaning. A decorated edge may signal age, status, achievement, or simply the fact that someone enjoys making things look nice. Human beings have a remarkable habit of decorating practical objects. Give people a coat that keeps them alive and, eventually, someone will decide it needs beads. Oddly enough, decorated Ice Age clothing may sometimes be reconstructed from burials. At certain prehistoric graves, archaeologists find rows or clusters of beads positioned around bodies in ways that suggest the ornaments were once sewn onto garments that have long since decayed. The organic fabric disappears. The decoration remains. A necklace leaves one pattern. A decorated cap or sleeve leaves another. The body becomes a faint outline of vanished clothing. You picture someone sewing those beads individually. The work takes hours, perhaps days. Each small ornament must be shaped, drilled, and attached. That investment tells you clothing can be more than insulation. It can be social, personal, beautiful. But warmth remains the urgent concern. Your feet especially demand attention. Walking across frozen ground without proper protection is not merely unpleasant. It can become dangerous very quickly. So you create footwear that separates skin from snow, ice, and cold soil. The design may involve hide wrapped or stitched around the foot, with softer material packed inside. Fur can provide insulation. Dry grass may serve as stuffing. Extra layers can be replaced when damp. You quickly learn that moisture is an enemy. Sweat matters. Snow melting against warm material matters. A boot that becomes wet can lose much of its insulating value. So clothing requires constant care. You dry it near a fire. Not too near. A hide that shrinks, scorches, or catches fire will not improve your evening. You rotate damp items. You brush away snow. You repair holes. You adjust ties. You replace worn pieces. Prehistoric clothing is not something you acquire once and forget. It is an ongoing project. A seam begins to separate and you stitch it. A sole becomes thin and you reinforce it. A strap snaps and you replace it. Every repair saves material and labour. The needle returns again and again. Your hands understand the movement so well that you can work while listening to conversation. Push, pull, tighten, check, push again. The rhythm is almost soothing. Outside, wind crosses the open country. Inside your clothing, trapped air remains comparatively still. That thin layer of warmth is the difference between exposure and endurance. The choice of animal skin matters too. Different hides offer different qualities. Some are thick, some are flexible. Fur density varies. Season affects the coat of many animals. Winter fur can provide better insulation than summer fur. A skilled person understands these differences. You do not simply see an animal, you see meat, tendons, bone, fat, hide, fur, and many possible future objects. Nothing useful is casually wasted. A reindeer skin might become part of a garment. Sinew can become thread or binding. Bone can become tools. Antler can become points or handles. The animal enters daily life in dozens of forms. One scandalous aside concerns the persistent image of prehistoric clothing as filthy, crude, and barely functional. It is certainly possible that some garments smell impressive by modern standards. Laundry facilities are limited. Perfumed detergent remains several thousand disappointments away. But crude does not mean incompetent. Ethnographic examples from Arctic peoples show just how technically demanding cold weather clothing can become. When communities build generations of experience around insulation, ventilation, fur direction, layering, and fit, you cannot simply copy later Arctic clothing directly onto Ice Age Europe or Asia. The cultures are different. The materials and climates vary. Still, the comparison reveals what is physically possible with hides, fur, sinew, and careful design. A garment made without metal scissors or a sewing machine can still be extremely effective. You flex your fingers inside a covering designed to protect them. Fine movement becomes harder when insulation grows thick. That creates another problem. Warmth and dexterity must balance. You need fingers protected from cold. But you also need to grip tools, prepare food, tie cords, and manipulate small objects. Perhaps you remove hand coverings for delicate work, then replace them quickly. Perhaps garments are designed with openings or shapes that make this easier. Every item carries compromises. A thick coat is warmer but heavier. A fitted garment conserves heat but takes more labour to produce. Water-resistant materials may breathe less effectively. Loose clothing ventilates better but lets cold air enter. This is engineering, even if nobody calls it that. You solve problems through repeated trial. A child complains that a seam rubs against the skin. You alter it. A hunter discovers that a particular sleeve restricts throwing. The next version changes. A boot leaks. The construction improves. Knowledge accumulates in hands. No agreement has been reached on whether tailored clothing first develops mainly as an adaptation to extreme cold, or whether fitted garments appear earlier for reasons including protection, decoration, modesty, or social identity. Clothing is difficult for archaeologists because most of it decays. Stone survives. Bone sometimes survives. Leather and fibre usually do not. So researchers often work indirectly. Needles suggest sewing. Hide scrapers suggest preparation. Bead arrangements hint at garment shapes, where patterns on tools reveal repeated tasks. Genetic research involving clothing lice has even been used in attempts to estimate when humans begin wearing clothing regularly. Though proposed dates and interpretations remain debated, the frustrating thing is that one of humanity's most important inventions leaves so little behind. Imagine trying to reconstruct a modern city after every piece of fabric has vanished. Shirts disappear, coats disappear, shoes disappear, curtains, blankets, bags, ropes, and upholstery disappear. You would lose an enormous part of ordinary life. Ice Age archaeology faces exactly that silence. Yet you can infer the missing world through the tools surrounding it. A polished bone needle lies beside worked hide. A scraper carries microscopic traces from animal skin. Beads rest in careful rows around a burial. Together they suggest hands sewing, fitting, repairing, and decorating. The process is intensely social. Children watch adults work. They learn which hide stretches well. They learn how far apart to place stitches. They learn how tightly to pull sinew before it tears. They learn how to judge whether a garment will fit. At first their stitches may wander. Someone corrects them. They try again. Skill passes from person to person, not through manuals, but through patience and repetition. You can almost hear the gentle irritation of a teacher saying the prehistoric equivalent of, "No, not like that." Eventually the learner becomes the teacher. That continuity matters because poorly made clothing can cost far more than pride. In severe cold, good tailoring protects life itself. You pull a hood around your head, the difference is immediate. Wind no longer reaches your ears directly. A fur edge breaks the flow of cold air around your face. Your chest remains warm beneath layered material. Your feet feel insulated from the ground. You're still standing in an Ice Age landscape. The temperature has not changed. The wind has not become friendlier. Your body has not grown a woolly coat overnight. And yet your personal climate is transformed. That may be the most elegant thing about clothing. You carry your shelter with you. Every stitched seam creates a tiny boundary between your skin and the larger frozen world. You can walk beyond the camp. You can follow tracks. You can gather materials. You can travel in weather that would otherwise keep you exposed and vulnerable. The garment moves when you move. Warmth travels with you. Bone needle, prepared hide, thread, fur, and patient hands combine into something more powerful than any single material. The cold continues to press against your clothing. It presses at the hood, at the sleeves, at the boots, but now it meets resistance. You tighten a fastening near your neck, flex your protected fingers, and step into the wind. Hunger has a way of making the landscape look different. A patch of frozen ground is no longer just frozen ground. It may conceal roots beneath the surface. A line of reeds near water suggests edible shoots, nesting birds, fish, and perhaps shellfish. A cluster of shrubs becomes a place to search for berries that survived the cold. Even a seemingly empty shoreline can become a pantry if you know where to look. You're not wandering through an Ice Age supermarket with conveniently labelled aisles. Food is scattered, seasonal, unpredictable, and almost everything worth eating requires work. The popular image of prehistoric people often begins with a spear and ends with a mammoth steak. That picture is memorable. It is also incomplete. Large animals certainly matter in many places, but human survival depends on a much broader menu. Depending on region and season, people eat meat, fish, shellfish, birds, eggs, nuts, seeds, fruits, roots, tubers, leaves, and whatever else can be gathered safely and efficiently. The crucial skill is not finding one perfect food. It is knowing dozens of possibilities. You walk toward a river where ice has formed along the edges. Open water remains in the center, dark and slow-moving. Animal tracks cross the muddy bank. The place feels promising because water concentrates life. Fish pass beneath the surface. Birds visit. Animals come to drink. Plants grow along the margins when the weather allows. A river is not merely something to drink from. It is a route, a landmark, and a food source. Records confirm that prehistoric humans exploit aquatic foods in many parts of the world. Archaeological sites preserve fish bones, shell remains, and tools associated with fishing or processing aquatic animals. This matters because rivers and coasts can provide resources when large land animals are difficult to locate. You crouch near the water, Fishing without modern equipment requires patience and ingenuity. A sharpened point can become a fish spear. Bone can be shaped into hooks or barbed points, nets, traps, baskets, and lines may be made from materials that usually decay before archaeologists ever see them. This creates a familiar problem: stone and bone survive. Plant fiber rarely does. So prehistoric fishing technology was probably richer than the surviving evidence suggests. You might place a trap in shallow water and return later. You might watch fish movement and spear from the bank. You might collect stranded animals during seasonal changes. None of this looks as dramatic as chasing a giant herbivore, which is probably why it receives fewer heroic paintings. But a basket of fish has one important advantage over a charging mammoth. The basket rarely attempts to trample you. Food gathering follows the same logic. You learn where particular plants grow and when they become useful. Some roots remain available underground during colder periods. Seeds can be collected and carried. Nuts provide valuable fat and energy. Berries appear during short seasonal windows and may be eaten fresh or combined with other foods. The landscape becomes a calendar. You do not need written dates. Flowers, animal behavior, daylight, rainfall, river levels, and plant growth tell you where you are in the year. A certain bird appears, a plant changes color, a herd moves through a valley. Each event signals another opportunity. Children learn these patterns early. You can imagine walking with an older relative who keeps stopping to point at things you would have ignored. This leaf, that root, those tracks. Do not eat that berry. Dig here. Look under the stones. Knowledge prevents mistakes and saves time. A poisonous plant and a useful plant may grow only a short distance apart. Experience matters. So does memory. One good gathering location may feed people for years if visited at the correct season. The work can be slow. You kneel and loosen soil with a digging stick. The ground is hard. Your fingers grow numb. At last a root comes free. It looks thoroughly unimpressive. No feast appears. No triumphant music begins. But roots do not need to impress anyone. They need to contain calories. Energy is the constant concern. Your body burns fuel simply to stay warm. Walking through cold terrain burns more. Carrying children, wood, hides, tools, or food increases the demand. So high-energy foods become especially valuable. Fat is one of the great prizes. Lean meat provides protein, but living for long periods on very lean meat alone can create serious nutritional problems. Fat supplies concentrated energy and helps the body process certain vitamins. This makes fatty parts of animals particularly desirable. Marrow hidden inside bones can be valuable. People crack long bones to reach it. Skulls and other bones may contain useful fats as well. Archaeologists often find bones broken in patterns consistent with marrow extraction. You place a heavy stone against a bone, another stone comes down. The bone splits. Inside is something far more valuable than the dry exterior suggests. It is messy. It is rich. And when food is uncertain, you do not become sentimental about presentation. A curious footnote appears in some archaeological deposits where bones are broken into remarkably small fragments. Researchers sometimes interpret this as evidence that people are extracting grease by crushing bones and heating them in water. Tiny fat droplets rise and can be collected. It is labor, intensive, but hunger encourages patience. You're essentially squeezing the final useful calories from the remains. Nothing goes casually into the prehistoric rubbish pile if it can still feed someone. Fire can transform many foods. Cooking meat makes chewing easier and can reduce certain biological risks. Heating roots may soften tough fibers. Some plant foods become more digestible after cooking. Bones can be processed, fat can be rendered. Food technology begins long before kitchens have walls. You arrange pieces near heat and watch carefully. Too little cooking and the food remains tough. too much and precious calories become charcoal. The ancient cook knows the frustration of burning dinner. Human progress apparently cannot eliminate that experience. The challenge becomes greater when food is abundant for only a short time. Suppose a herd passes nearby. Suddenly, you possess more meat than your group can immediately eat. Without refrigeration, this creates a problem. Cold weather helps, of course. Freezing can preserve food naturally when temperatures remain low enough. But weather changes. Scavengers arrive. Thawing begins. People therefore develop ways to extend the usefulness of food. Drying is one possibility. Thin strips lose moisture faster than thick pieces. Smoke may help preserve certain foods while also discouraging insects. Cold, dry air can become part of the preservation process. Fat may be stored separately. Some foods can be cached in cool places. A hole in frozen ground can act rather like a crude freezer. Although trusting your dinner to an unguarded hole is also an excellent way to feed a fox. Storage requires planning. You must remember where food is hidden. You must protect it from animals. You must decide how much to eat now and how much to save. That decision becomes especially difficult because the future is uncertain. Eat too much today and next week may become dangerous. Save too much and someone may steal it. An animal may find it, or the weather may ruin it. Survival depends not only on acquiring food but on managing risk. This is where sharing becomes important. One person may return empty-handed while another has gathered enough for several people. A hunting party may succeed only occasionally. Shellfish collectors may bring food back reliably. Someone may discover a patch of edible plants. Another person may catch fish. If everyone depends only on personal success, bad luck becomes deadly. If food circulates through the group, individual failure matters less. The meal in front of you may therefore represent many different efforts. A piece of meat, a handful of seeds, roots softened near the heat, perhaps fish, perhaps fat added to something otherwise rather lean. There is no fixed prehistoric menu because ecosystems differ enormously. Humans living near a coast do not eat exactly like humans deep inland. People in wooded regions have access to foods unavailable on open steppe. Southern groups experience different plants and animals from northern ones. Season changes everything. The cleverness lies in flexibility. Scholars bicker over exactly how important plant foods are in many Ice Age diets because plants leave fewer archaeological traces than large animal bones. A mammoth femur can survive for thousands of years. A handful of berries cannot. Stone tools associated with butchery may be obvious. A wooden digging stick may vanish completely. Even traces of cooked plants can be difficult to detect without careful microscopic or chemical analysis. So the archaeological record can exaggerate the importance of whatever preserves best. Researchers increasingly examine residues, dental calculus, microscopic starch grains, and wear on tools to recover parts of the diet that bones alone cannot reveal. The result is a more complicated picture. People are opportunists. You eat what works. There is no prestige in starving beside an edible riverbank because you are waiting for something impressive with tusks. In some regions, shellfish become especially attractive. At low tide, you can gather mussels, limpets, snails, crabs, or other coastal foods depending on location. The work can be repetitive but reliable. You walk across wet stone with a container in hand. Cold spray reaches your ankles. Shells click together. A seabird protests your presence from somewhere above. One handful becomes another. Soon the container grows heavy. Shell middens, enormous accumulations of discarded shells at some archaeological sites, show just how intensively people can use coastal resources. Seafood provides protein and useful micronutrients. Coastal environments may also offer seaweed. Birds, eggs, marine mammals, and stranded animals. The shore is unpredictable but generous. There is another advantage to varied food. If one resource fails, another may remain. A herd changes migration route. You gather plants. Fish become scarce. You search for shellfish or small animals. A dry spell reduces berries. Stored fat becomes more valuable. This flexibility is one of the quiet reasons humans survive environmental instability. Specialization can be efficient. Variety can be safer. You also learn that food has social meaning. The best piece may be offered to someone important. Children may receive softer foods. Older people with worn teeth need meals that are easier to chew. Someone who's injured may depend entirely on what others bring back. Cooking changes texture enough to make food accessible to people who could not manage it raw. Grinding, pounding, cutting, and boiling all extend who can eat what. That matters in a world where every experienced adult carries knowledge. Keeping an older person fed can preserve decades of memory. The value of a meal is therefore larger than the calories it contains. It keeps experience alive. It keeps children growing. It allows exhausted people to recover. It buys time. Night settles while the last food is divided. There is no overflowing table. Nothing is wasted casually. A scrap may become tomorrow's meal. A bone may still contain marrow. A handful of dried food may be saved for travel. You eat slowly because the work required to obtain every mouthful remains visible all around you. The river murmurs under thin ice. Somewhere in darkness, an animal calls. Your stomach finally feels warm and heavy enough to stop demanding attention. For tonight, that is success, not abundance, not luxury. Enough. And in a world where the next meal is never guaranteed, enough is one of the most valuable words you know. The herd appears first as movement on the horizon. Dark shapes drift across pale grassland, too far away to identify at first. Then one animal lifts its head, another follows, and the whole group seems to ripple beneath the cold sky. You stop walking. Everyone around you stops too. There is no shouting, no dramatic charge, no heroic sprint with a spear raised over your head. That would be an excellent way to frighten the animals, exhaust yourself, and become the subject of a very short cautionary story. Instead, you watch. Hunting begins long before anyone throws a weapon. You study wind direction. You inspect tracks. You notice which animals stay near the center of the herd and which drift toward the edge. You consider the ground. A steep slope may slow an animal. A narrow valley may restrict movement. A patch of soft earth may become dangerous under heavy feet. You're not trying to overpower a large herbivore. You're trying to create circumstances in which strength matters less. That is an important distinction. Many Ice Age animals are larger, faster, and more dangerous than a human being. A reindeer can outrun you. A horse can outrun you. A bison can injure you with frightening efficiency. A mammoth is so large that approaching one carelessly would require either extraordinary courage or a serious misunderstanding of scale. So successful hunting depends on planning, cooperation, knowledge, and patience. Records confirm that humans hunt a wide range of large animals during the Ice Age, including reindeer, horses, bison, deer, wild cattle, and in some regions mammoths. Animal bones found at archaeological sites sometimes carry cut marks from stone tools, impact damage, or patterns of breakage showing that carcasses were butchered and processed. But finding animal bones beside human tools does not automatically tell you exactly how the animal dies. People may hunt it, they may scavenge it, they may find an animal already weakened, they may drive it toward a dangerous landscape feature. The details matter. You crouch beside a set of tracks and touch the edge with your fingers. They are fresh. The shape tells you something about the animal. The depth tells you something about its weight and the softness of the ground. The direction matters. So does the spacing. Tracks are information. To someone inexperienced, they are marks in dirt. To a skilled hunter, they are a moving story. One animal limps, another pauses often. Several young animals travel together. The herd may be heading toward water. You read the signs because choosing the right target reduces risk. A healthy adult bison is a formidable opponent. A weaker or isolated animal may offer a better chance. This is not cruelty in the modern recreational sense. It is survival calculation. Every serious injury threatens more than the injured person. A broken leg removes one worker from the group and creates someone who may need help moving, eating, and staying warm. A hunting mistake can therefore affect everyone. Risk must be worth the reward. Large animals offer enormous rewards. Meat is only the beginning. Hide becomes clothing or shelter covering. Sinew becomes thread and binding. Fat becomes food and fuel. Bone becomes tools. Antler may become points, handles, or other implements. Teeth and ivory can become ornaments. Even stomach contents may occasionally offer useful plant material or clues about seasonal grazing. A carcass is not simply dinner. It is a collection of resources. This is why the butchering process matters so much. Imagine the animal finally lies still. The most dangerous moment may be over, but the work has barely begun. You approach carefully, stone blades come out. People divide tasks. Hide must be cut, muscle removed, organs inspected, fat collected, bones separated, useful materials kept clean enough to transport. Time matters because scavengers will notice the smell. Weather matters. Distance from camp matters. A huge carcass may contain far more than you can carry. You must decide what to take first. High-value parts receive priority. Fatty tissue, large muscle groups, marrow-rich bones, hide if it can be transported, useful tendons. The selection varies depending on circumstances. If camp lies nearby, more can be carried. If you have travelled far, weight becomes a problem. A mammoth may provide an astonishing quantity of material, but it does not politely divide itself into convenient shopping bags. You cut, lift, drag, tie, and carry. Your hands become numb. Your shoulders ache. Cold air fills with the smell of blood, hide, earth, and animal fat. No gore is required to understand the physical reality. Processing a large animal is exhausting. One curious footnote appears in the enormous quantities of mammoth bone found at some prehistoric sites. People clearly use mammoth remains, but not every concentration proves a dramatic mammoth hunt. Natural deaths, scavenging, bone collecting, repeated use of old carcass sites, and human hunting can all contribute to such deposits. This is one of those moments where archaeology asks you to resist the most cinematic explanation. A pile of mammoth bones looks exciting. The story behind it may involve several events spread across many years. Still, mammoths clearly matter. Size alone makes them impossible to ignore. An adult mammoth towers over you. Its thick coat moves in the wind. Tusks curve forward. The ground seems to absorb the weight of each step. You do not simply run toward such an animal. If people hunt mammoths directly, they need tactics. Perhaps hunters isolate a vulnerable individual. Perhaps they exploit steep ground, boggy areas, river edges, or other difficult terrain. Perhaps repeated wounds weaken the animal. Perhaps opportunities arise when animals become trapped naturally. The exact methods are difficult to reconstruct. That uncertainty leads directly to one of the great questions of Ice Age hunting. Historians and archaeologists still argue whether large-scale, cooperative hunting of mammoths is common in some regions, or whether humans more often exploit mammoth carcasses opportunistically. Evidence differs from site to site. At some locations, cut marks and association with tools strongly suggest active human processing. At others, the sequence of events remains uncertain. The safest conclusion is that Ice Age people use several strategies rather than one universal method. That makes sense. You use whatever reduces danger. Hunting reindeer may involve different tactics from hunting bison. Hunting horses in open country differs from hunting animals near a ravine. Landscape shapes technique. Season matters too. During migrations, herds may follow predictable routes. That predictability allows people to position themselves strategically. You might wait near a crossing point. You might use a narrow corridor between natural features. You might coordinate several people to influence the herd's direction. Human voices, movement, fire, or barriers could help channel animals, though evidence for specific techniques varies greatly. Cooperation becomes essential. One person cannot watch every direction. Several people can. You communicate quietly. A hand signal, a glance, a movement of the head. Everyone understands the plan because the plan has been discussed repeatedly. Someone circles wide. Another group remains hidden. Others wait near the intended path. Patience stretches. The animals move closer. Now your weapon matters. A simple thrusting spear is useful at close range. But close range is exactly where large animals become most dangerous. Projectile weapons change the balance. Wooden spears can be thrown. Later technologies improve range and force. One especially important tool is the spear thrower, often called an atlatl in modern discussions, though that particular word comes from a much later language and region. The device acts as a lever. It extends your throwing arm and can send a dart or spear with greater speed. You fit the end of the projectile against the thrower. Your arm moves. The lever adds force. The weapon leaves your hand faster than it would from an unaided throw. This allows you to strike from farther away. Distance is valuable when the animal in front of you weighs several 100 kilograms and has horns. Stone points may be attached to shafts. Bone and antler points appear as well. Some designs include barbs. Bindings hold components together. Adhesives may strengthen joins. What looks like a simple spear can actually be a composite technology requiring several materials and several kinds of expertise. Wood must be straightened. A point must be shaped. Sinew or fibre must be prepared. Glue may need heating or mixing. The shaft must balance properly. A poorly made weapon can fail at the worst possible moment. You test it. You repair it. You carry spares when possible. One scandalous aside concerns the idea that prehistoric hunters simply hurl weapons wildly into enormous herds until something falls over. That method would waste ammunition, frighten every animal in sight, and make your companions extremely unhappy. Hunters likely value accuracy. A good projectile takes time to manufacture. Recovering it may matter. Choosing a clear shot matters. Understanding animal anatomy matters. You learn where a wound is most likely to weaken an animal. You learn when not to throw. Restraint is part of hunting skill. Eventually the herd breaks. Hooves pound the ground. Dust rises despite the cold. Animals turn together in sudden confusion or your heart races. Someone shouts. A projectile flies. Then another. The landscape fills with motion. This is the brief dramatic part that survives in imagination, but it lasts only moments compared with the hours of preparation, and success is never guaranteed. Some hunts fail, probably many do. Animals escape, wind shifts, tracks disappear, a weapon misses. Someone makes noise too early. The herd takes an unexpected route. You return with nothing. That failure matters, but it is normal. Hunting is uncertain. This is why no sensible community relies on heroic success every single day. A large kill can provide abundance for a time. A failed hunt provides a lesson. People review what happens. Perhaps the approach was wrong. Perhaps the wind betrayed you. Perhaps the animals were more alert than expected. Knowledge accumulates through failure as well as success. The next opportunity comes with changes. You know the terrain better. You understand the herd's behavior more clearly. Your weapon improves. Your timing improves. There is another reason hunting large animals requires social trust. The reward must be distributed. If several people risk injury, track the herd, make weapons, process the carcass, and transport the meat, the result belongs to a web of effort. Children eat from it. Older adults eat from it. People who gathered fuel, prepared tools, maintained camp, or cared for infants also depend on the food. The hunt is not an isolated performance by one impressive individual. It is part of a larger system. The famous hunter standing alone beside a mammoth makes a striking image. The invisible network behind that hunter is what keeps the community alive. As evening settles, pieces of meat hang or lie cooling in the cold air. Bones wait to be cracked or worked. Hide has been set aside. Tools need cleaning and resharpening. Your muscles feel heavy. There is satisfaction, certainly, but not triumph in the theatrical sense. The animal has fed people. Its body will become many things. Tomorrow, the work continues. Tonight, the herd has disappeared beyond the dark horizon. The grassland is quiet again. You sit with tired hands and understand why large animals become such powerful symbols in Ice Age art and memory. They are dangerous. They are useful. They demand skill. And every successful encounter reminds you that human beings survive not by becoming stronger than the giants around them, but by becoming better at working together. A child wakes crying in the dark. Someone reaches for her before the sound is fully formed. Another person shifts closer to the entrance and listens for movement outside. A third adds fuel to the fire. Nobody has held a meeting. Nobody announces a duty roster. The response is simply woven into daily life. This may be one of the least dramatic scenes in the Ice Age, and one of the most important. Human survival is not merely a contest between individuals and cold weather. It is a social achievement. You can make a sharp tool. You can find food. You can recognize tracks. But eventually you become sick, injured, exhausted, pregnant, elderly, very young, or simply unlucky. At that moment, the strength of the people around you matters more than your personal skill. You are born into dependence. A human infant cannot walk beside a migrating group. It cannot gather food. It cannot regulate its temperature particularly well. It requires years of care before it can contribute much physically. This is an extraordinary burden compared with many other animals. A young reindeer finds its feet quickly. A human child spends months discovering that its own toes are interesting. Yet the long childhood that makes humans vulnerable also creates time for learning. You watch adults. You listen. You imitate. You absorb knowledge about animals, plants, weather, tools, social rules, dangerous places, useful places, and the complicated business of dealing with other people. Childhood becomes an apprenticeship in survival, and raising children cannot fall entirely to one exhausted parent. Other people help. Older siblings carry infants. Grandparents supervise. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and unrelated companions may contribute food, protection, teaching, or comfort. Anthropologists sometimes describe this broad pattern as cooperative breeding, meaning that human children often receive care from multiple individuals rather than only their biological parents. You experience its logic immediately. One adult leaves to collect materials, another watches several children. Someone prepares food. Someone repairs a tool while answering questions from a curious youngster who appears determined to ask why roughly every 12 seconds. The work overlaps. Childcare is not separate from survival. It is survival. Records confirm that ancient humans sometimes lived for years with injuries or physical conditions that would have made independent survival extremely difficult. Some prehistoric skeletons show healed fractures, severe dental loss, degenerative disease, or other long-term impairments. Healing takes time. A serious injury does not repair itself overnight. If someone survives long enough for bone to knit together, that can suggest support from others, though the exact amount of care differs from case to case. You picture a person with an injured leg. Walking is painful. Hunting is impossible for a while. Carrying heavy loads is out of the question. Yet the person still eats. Someone brings water. Someone shares food. Someone may help them move. Perhaps the injured person continues doing work that can be performed while sitting. They repair equipment. teach children, shape small objects, tell others where a herd tends to cross. Physical limitation does not automatically make a person useless. Knowledge has value, hands have value, memory has value, conversation has value. A community can reorganize labor around temporary weakness. This ability becomes especially important in environments where accidents are common: a fall on ice, a cut from a stone tool, a damaged tooth, an infected wound, a twisted ankle on rough ground. None of these needs to be spectacular to become dangerous. Modern medicine has trained you to regard many minor injuries as annoying rather than threatening. In the Ice Age, even a damaged foot can create a serious problem when the group needs to move. So people help. Perhaps they slow their pace. Perhaps they carry more of the injured person's belongings. Perhaps they remain in one place longer than planned. Such choices have costs. Helping someone requires energy. That is precisely why evidence for long-term survival with serious impairment is so revealing. Care is not free. It represents a decision. One curious footnote comes from individuals who survive after losing most or even all of their teeth. Without teeth, eating tough raw foods becomes difficult. Yet some prehistoric people live long enough for their jaws to heal extensively after tooth loss. Someone may have softened food for them. Meat can be cut into small pieces. Plant foods can be mashed or cooked. Fat requires little chewing. A toothless elder is therefore not automatically abandoned. Instead, the menu can change. You can imagine the quiet practicality. No grand declaration of compassion. Just someone crushing food a little more thoroughly. That small gesture may extend a life. And an older person can carry information that nobody else possesses. They remember a drought from decades earlier. They know which distant valley provides shelter during unusual weather. They remember the habits of another group encountered long ago. They know stories that explain where resources lie and which places should be avoided. Human beings do not store knowledge only in objects. They store it in people. Keeping people alive therefore keeps information alive. You begin to see the group differently. The strongest hunter is useful. So is the patient teacher. So is the skilled hide worker. So is the person who calms frightened children. So is the person with excellent memory. So is the individual who can repair a broken point quickly. Survival depends on specialization without complete dependence on specialization. Most adults probably know many tasks, but individuals may become especially good at certain things. That creates exchange within the community. You help me now, I help you later. No written contract is required. Reputation does the accounting. If you repeatedly take food but never assist anyone when able, people notice. If you share during abundance, people remember. If you care for someone else's child, that favor may return years later in another form. Trust accumulates. So does resentment. Human social life is never perfectly harmonious. There are arguments, jealousies, rivalries. People probably gossip with enthusiasm. Someone thinks another person has taken more than a fair share. Someone chooses the wrong partner. Someone refuses advice. The Ice Age does not remove personality. If anything, living closely with a small number of people makes personality impossible to escape. There is no private apartment to retreat into. You wake beside the same faces, travel beside them, work beside them, eat beside them, sleep within hearing distance of their snoring. Cooperation does not mean everyone likes everyone. It means enough people recognize that mutual dependence is useful. Scholars bicker over how egalitarian Ice Age communities actually are. Some researchers emphasize relatively flexible social relations among mobile hunter-gatherers, where possessions are limited and cooperation discourages extreme inequality. Others point to elaborate burials, ornaments, long-distance exchange, and differences in grave treatment as possible signs of status distinctions. The evidence does not give one universal answer. Different communities may organize themselves differently. Age matters. Skill matters. Family connections matter. Personal influence matters. Leadership may shift depending on the task. The best person to guide a hunt is not necessarily the person whose judgment everyone trusts during a dispute. Authority can be temporary, practical, negotiated. You might follow one experienced person across unfamiliar terrain, then ignore their opinion entirely when another person begins preparing hides. Expertise has context. Relationships also extend beyond the immediate group. This is crucial. A small community living permanently alone faces enormous risks. Disease can remove several people. Food shortages can become severe. Partners may be difficult to find. Knowledge can become limited. Contact with neighbouring groups expands the safety net. You may meet others seasonally at a river crossing, a rich hunting ground, a source of high-quality stone, or a location used for ceremony and exchange. The meeting is noisy compared with ordinary camp life. New voices, new faces. Children stare at strangers. People examine unfamiliar ornaments. Stories travel rapidly. So do jokes. News may matter even more than objects. A distant valley has become dry. A herd has shifted west. A river crossing is dangerous. A particular family has moved. Another group has found excellent stone. Such information can save days of wasted travel. Exchange networks may carry shells, pigments, stone, ivory, beads, and other materials across impressive distances. Not every object travels in one person's hands from source to destination. It may move through several communities. One exchange becomes another. A shell collected near a coast can eventually appear hundreds of kilometers inland. Its journey leaves no written diary, but its presence tells you that people are connected. These connections help with marriage and partnership too. Small groups cannot remain genetically isolated forever without consequences. Regular contact creates opportunities for people to join other communities. A young adult may leave one group and live with another. Families become linked across landscapes. Now hospitality has practical value. The strangers arriving at your camp may be related to someone you love. They may become future hosts when your own group travels. They may provide shelter during a difficult season. Social networks become another form of insurance. You cannot carry enough food to protect yourself against every disaster. You can carry relationships. This might be humanity's most portable survival technology. A council decree proves nothing here because there is no council archive, but archaeological evidence of materials moving over long distances strongly supports the existence of broad networks connecting communities. Objects travel because people do. Ideas travel with them. Perhaps a new tool design appears. Perhaps someone learns a better stitching technique. Perhaps a particular ornament becomes fashionable. Yes, even in the Ice Age, you may have to deal with trends. A visitor arrives wearing a clever new bead arrangement, and suddenly everyone in camp becomes mysteriously dissatisfied with last year's necklace. Innovation can spread through exactly these contacts. One person discovers something useful, another copies it, a third modifies it. Within generations, a technique can travel far beyond its point of origin. Social connection therefore accelerates adaptation. You do not need every group to invent every solution independently. You borrow, you observe, you imitate. Sometimes you probably pretend the idea was yours. By evening, several families sit close together. Food moves between hands. An older person speaks while younger listeners work. A baby sleeps against someone's chest. An injured adult shapes a piece of bone. Two people disagree quietly about tomorrow's plans. Across the fire, someone laughs. There is no single hero here. That is the point. The community survives because responsibility spreads. Weakness does not always become disaster because another person can compensate for it. Children live long enough to learn because many hands protect them. Injured adults recover because food reaches them. Older people remain valuable because knowledge still matters when strength fades. Distant allies widen the world beyond one camp. You look around at the faces in the firelight and understand something profound. Cold can be resisted with insulation, hunger can be answered with food, but isolation is harder to survive. The people beside you are not merely companions, they are memory, protection, education, backup and possibility. In a harsh world, belonging is equipment. The land never stays still for long. You follow a river through a wide valley where cold water slides between gravel banks, carrying bits of ice toward a distant plain. On one side, low hills rise beneath a pale sky. On the other, animal tracks cross the mud in several directions, some fresh, some softened by wind. This is not random wandering. Every movement has a reason. A herd has shifted, a water source has weakened, snow has become deeper in one valley, a familiar plant now grows farther south, a coastline has changed. The best place to live in spring may become a poor place by winter, and the safest route in one year may become dangerous in the next. Mobility is not restlessness. It is a survival strategy. You learn to think of the landscape as a chain of possibilities rather than a permanent home. There are places for cold months, places for gathering, places where animals cross, places where stone can be collected, places where storms are less severe, places where fish appear at certain times. The map is not drawn on paper. It exists in memory. You remember the bend in a river where the water becomes shallow enough to cross. You remember a rock shelter that stays dry even when rain arrives from the west. You remember a ridge where reindeer can be seen from far away. These memories guide movement. Records confirm that prehistoric people repeatedly travel long distances through Ice Age landscapes, and archaeological materials often appear far from the places where they naturally occur. Stone is one of the clearest examples. The distinctive piece of flint, obsidian, or other rock can sometimes be traced to a source many kilometers away. Perhaps you carry it yourself. Perhaps it passes through several groups. Either way, people are moving across large areas. The ground itself encourages certain routes. Rivers become natural corridors. Their valleys often provide waters, game, plants, and relatively easy travel. You can follow the same river for days without losing your sense of direction. In winter, frozen sections may simplify crossings. In warmer months, those same crossings can become difficult or impossible. Timing matters. A route that welcomes you in one season may reject you in another. You step onto gravel polished smooth by water. The sound beneath your feet changes from crunching frost to loose clicking stones. Ahead, the valley narrows. Steep slopes rise on both sides. This can be useful. Animals may also follow narrow terrain, where the landscape funnels movement. Humans gain predictability. A broad plain offers many directions. A narrow pass offers fewer. So you pay attention to places where geography simplifies the behavior of animals. You also watch the sky. Seasonal movement depends partly on daylight. Longer days can signal changes in temperature and plant growth. Bird migrations provide clues. Insect activity returns. Snow softens, streams rise. The world begins announcing that certain resources will soon move or appear. You do not use a written calendar, but you understand sequences. First this bird arrives, then the river rises, then a particular plant becomes available, then the herd usually passes. A calendar made of living things is flexible because it responds to actual conditions. That is useful in an unstable climate. A date written on a wall cannot tell you that winter has lasted longer than usual. A frozen river can. Movement also means deciding what not to carry. Your possessions matter, but weight matters too. Every object has a cost. A stone tool is useful. 10 kilograms of unused stone is exhausting. A hide may be essential. A bulky object with little immediate value becomes a problem after several hours of walking. So you travel with equipment selected carefully. Tools that perform several tasks are especially valuable. Raw materials may be carried when they are difficult to find elsewhere. Food must be balanced against weight. Infants and injured people may require additional assistance. There is no prehistoric luggage service quietly following behind. You carry what matters, and what matters can change with destination. A curious footnote appears in the way some toolkits seem designed for mobility. Portable stone cores can be carried and struck later to produce fresh flakes when needed. Instead of manufacturing every tool in advance, you transport the potential to make tools. It is a clever compromise. A compact lump of prepared stone becomes a small reserve of future cutting edges. You could think of it as prehistoric spare parts, except the parts are still trapped inside the rock. You travel toward higher ground. Wind increases. The river becomes smaller behind you. From the ridge, the landscape opens. Low vegetation stretches toward the horizon. Far away, dots move slowly. Animals. Your group watches them, not because you must chase every herd you see, but because animals reveal conditions. Grazers need food. Large concentrations may indicate productive ground. If they disappear from a region, something has changed. Perhaps snow is too deep. Perhaps grass has become scarce. Perhaps they have begun seasonal migration. You learn animal routes almost like roads. Some are followed year after year. Reindeer can move great distances between seasonal ranges. Other species shift according to water, forage, breeding cycles, and weather. Humans do not necessarily trail directly behind every herd. That would be inconvenient and sometimes dangerous. Instead, you anticipate where animals are likely to appear. Knowledge turns migration into opportunity. Coasts offer another kind of road. During colder ice age phases, enormous quantities of water are locked in ice sheets. Sea levels fall. Land appears where ocean exists today. The shape of continents changes. Shallow seas shrink. Coastal plains expand. For people alive at the time, these are not vanished landscapes, as they are simply home. You might walk across ground that will one day lie beneath deep water. There is grass under your feet. Freshwater channels cross the plain. Animals graze. Nothing about the place feels temporary. Yet thousands of years later, rising seas will erase camps, pathways, and gathering places beneath waves. This creates a major problem for modern archaeology. Some of the most attractive routes for prehistoric people may now be underwater. No agreement has been reached on exactly how important coastal migration is in every region, because so much potential evidence lies beneath modern seas. Some scholars argue that shorelines, estuaries, and marine resources could have supported rapid human movement. Others emphasize inland routes and river systems. The answer probably differs by time and place. The missing coastline keeps many arguments alive. Imagine following a cold shore. The air smells of salt and wet stone. Waves push against a broad beach. Seabirds circle above. Movement along the coast provides repeated access to water and food, but cliffs, storms, tides, and river mouths can interrupt your path. Again, no route is perfect. You choose between difficulties. Farther inland, ice itself can shape where you go. Great glaciers are not smooth white roads inviting exploration. Their margins can be chaotic. Crevasses open. Meltwater streams shift. Loose rock and mud collect near the edges. Cold air pours downhill. You generally prefer routes around these obstacles rather than directly across them. Ice sheets also redirect rivers and create lakes. When ice blocks drainage, water may collect behind natural barriers. If those barriers fail, enormous floods can reshape valleys. You live in a landscape capable of sudden violence even without storms. This does not mean you understand glacial geology in scientific terms. You understand consequences, that valley floods, that slope collapses, that lake rises in spring. That route is unsafe after heavy thaw. Practical knowledge does not require formal theory. It requires memory and observation. You reach a broad crossing where several paths intersect. Human tracks are difficult to preserve, but you can imagine such places becoming familiar meeting points, a river ford, a narrow pass, a stone source, a sheltered basin. Certain locations naturally attract repeated visits. Each return adds another layer of knowledge, where fuel can be found, where water tastes clean, where mosquitoes become unbearable in warmer weather. Even Ice Age survival has moments of irritation that no heroic painting bothers to include. You can endure bitter wind and still become completely furious with an insect buzzing near your ear. Movement carries risks of its own. Unknown terrain may hide cliffs, bogs, predators, or poor water. Travel burns energy. Children tire. Weather changes while you're exposed. A wrong decision can leave you between safe places, so route planning matters. You rarely move simply because you feel like seeing somewhere new. There may be curiosity, of course. Humans are curious creatures, but major relocation usually has costs. You weigh those costs against the danger of staying. Perhaps the local herd has not returned. Perhaps fuel is becoming scarce. Perhaps several seasons of poor rainfall have reduced plant foods. Perhaps another group occupies a nearby area, creating tension. Perhaps the population has grown and splitting into smaller groups makes sense. Movement solves some problems and creates others. That is the balance. You descend from the ridge toward another valley. The ground becomes softer. Small shrubs appear. You smell damp soil beneath melting frost. This microclimate feels different from the exposed plain above. A few kilometers can change everything. One valley may trap snow. Another may remain relatively dry. A south-facing slope receives more sunlight. A sheltered hollow may support plants unavailable on a windy plateau. People who know these small differences can move efficiently between resource zones. The landscape is not uniform. It is a mosaic. Your route links the useful pieces. Scholars still debate how often Ice Age groups make long seasonal circuits compared with shorter repeated movements around a central area. Some evidence suggests broad ranges. Other sites indicate repeated occupation of favoured locations. Mobility is probably not one pattern but many. A community near abundant year-round resources may move less. A group dependent on migrating animals may travel farther. A severe climate shift may suddenly expand the distance required. Flexibility remains the common thread. You can change the pattern when conditions change. As evening approaches, you stop near a protected bend in the valley. There is water nearby. Tracks show animals passed recently. The slope blocks part of the wind. You look back toward the ridge you crossed and then toward the route ahead. The distance already travelled disappears into shadow. For you, survival is not about owning one perfect place. It is about knowing many places well enough to move between them. A river becomes a guide. A coastline becomes a corridor. A valley becomes a seasonal refuge. A herd becomes a moving signal. The world remains enormous, but it is not meaningless. Each landmark tells you something. Each journey adds another line to the map carried in your head. And when the climate shifts, when animals move, when water changes course, you're not trapped by the loss of one location. You lift what you can carry, turn toward the next familiar route, and keep walking. A stone rests in your palm. At first glance, it does not look remarkable. It is grey, slightly glossy along one edge, and small enough to disappear inside a closed hand. Yet when you tilt it toward the light, the edge catches sharply. This little object can cut hide, slice meat, shape wood, trim sinew, prepare plant fibres, and help manufacture half a dozen other tools. That is the important thing about Ice Age technology. A tool rarely exists alone. One tool helps make another. A stone flake shapes a wooden shaft. The shaft receives a carefully prepared point. Sinew binds them together. Adhesive strengthens the joint. A bone needle stitches clothing that lets you travel farther in cold weather. A lamp illuminates work after darkness. Slowly. Ordinary materials become a system, and systems change survival. Records confirm that Ice Age people manufacture an astonishing variety of stone implements, from simple flakes with razor-sharp edges to carefully prepared blades, points, burins, scrapers, and specialized cutting tools. Stone technology can look simple until you try making it yourself. You choose a suitable piece of flint or another stone that fractures predictably. Then you strike it, not randomly. The angle matters. The force matters. The shape of the core matters. Strike badly and the stone breaks somewhere useless. Strike correctly and a thin flake comes away with an edge sharp enough to cut skin. You rotate the core. Another strike. Another flake. Each blow depends on understanding how fracture travels through stone. An experienced napper sees possibilities inside the rock before removing anything. You probably see a lump. They see future blades. That difference is years of practice. The sound is distinctive. Tap, crack, tap, crack. Small fragments scatter over the ground. Anyone sitting too close learns quickly that prehistoric craftsmanship does not come with safety glasses. Sharp flakes are valuable because they create cutting power without metal. A fresh stone edge can be extremely sharp. It can slice meat cleanly. It can score bone. It can shave wood. It can trim hide, but edges dull, so you resharpen them. Sometimes the entire tool changes form as it becomes smaller. A large cutting piece may eventually become a scraper. A scraper may be reshaped again. Useful stone is not wasted casually, especially when high-quality material comes from far away. You carry certain cores because they contain many future tools. This makes technology portable. What matters is not merely the tool in your hand. It is knowing how to reproduce it. That knowledge is carried inside your mind. A curious footnote appears in archaeological sites where piles of stone debris remain beside finished tools. The waste flakes are not useless to archaeologists. Their shape can reveal the exact sequence used to manufacture an object. Sometimes researchers can even refit individual flakes back onto a core, almost like rebuilding a shattered puzzle. You can then reconstruct where someone sits, how they turn the stone, and which blows happen first. An event lasting perhaps 20 minutes survives for tens of thousands of years as a scatter of chips. There is something wonderfully ordinary about that. You're not looking at a monument, you're looking at someone's workspace. Stone is only the beginning. Wood is enormously important, though it rarely survives. You straighten a shaft by heating it gently and bending it. You scrape the surface smooth. You taper one end. Perhaps you attach a point. Perhaps the wood itself becomes the weapon. Ancient wooden spears found at rare waterlogged sites prove that early humans can manufacture carefully balanced hunting weapons long before many later Ice Age technologies appear. Wood probably fills prehistoric life. Handles, digging sticks, tent poles, containers, shafts, clubs, traps, frames, racks, possibly sled components in suitable environments. Most of it disappears, leaving an archaeological world that looks far stonier than daily life probably feels. Bone and antler offer another range of possibilities. They can be cut, scraped, polished, drilled, and shaped. You hold a piece of antler and begin working its surface. The material is tough. It does not fracture like flint. That toughness makes it useful for objects that must absorb repeated stress. Points can be made long and narrow. Barbs can be added. Handles can be shaped to fit the hand. Small wedges and awls can pierce or separate materials. The toolkit becomes increasingly specialized. This specialization saves time. Imagine cutting every material with the same crude edge? Possible, perhaps. Efficient? No. A scraper shape for hide processing works better than a general cutting flake. A burin with a narrow working tip helps carve grooves in bone or antler. A needle makes sewing far more precise than punching holes with a large point. Each specialized object reduces effort, and reducing effort matters when every calorie counts. You now pick up another object, It looks almost insignificant. A short piece of shaped antler or bone, perhaps decorated with one end designed to engage the butt of a long projectile. This is a spear thrower. Its purpose is mechanical. Your arm already acts as a lever. The thrower extends that lever. When you swing, the end of the device travels faster than your hand, adding speed to the projectile. The result is greater range and force. No metal spring, no engine, just geometry. You fit a dart into position. The movement feels unfamiliar at first. Then you throw. The shaft launches forward with a speed that surprises you. Technology has extended your body. That idea appears everywhere. A digging stick extends your hand into hard soil. A blade gives your fingers a cutting edge they do not naturally possess. A needle gives you a point finer than a fingertip. A spear thrower lengthens your arm. A container lets your hands carry more than they can hold. Human survival depends partly on surrounding the body with artificial abilities. You do not evolve claws. You make knives. You do not evolve thicker fingers for digging. You shape wood. You do not wait for your arm to become longer. You add a lever. It is a very human solution. Oddly enough, some Ice Age spear throwers are decorated with beautifully carved animals. A tool designed to launch deadly projectiles might carry the image of a horse, ibex, bison, or another creature. The decoration requires extra labour. Nobody needs a carved animal for the lever to work, yet someone makes it anyway. Function and art comfortably occupy the same object. Perhaps the carving carries symbolic meaning. Perhaps it marks ownership. Perhaps it is simply pleasing. Humans apparently refuse to leave useful things undecorated when a little extra effort can make them interesting. Traps offer an entirely different technological advantage. Instead of relying only on direct pursuit, you let landscape and mechanism work for you. The difficulty for archaeology is that many traps are built from wood, fibre, brush, and earth. They decay. Still, ethnographic comparison and indirect evidence make simple trapping technologies highly plausible for prehistoric people. You might construct a snare for small animals. You might create a funnel leading toward a confined space. You might use nets. Fish traps can exploit currents. Pit traps may work in some contexts, though identifying ancient examples securely is difficult. A trap changes the relationship between effort and reward. Set it once, check it later. Perhaps it succeeds while you perform another task. That is remarkably efficient. Of course, perhaps it catches nothing. Technology never completely removes disappointment. You inspect an empty snare and discover that innovation still requires optimism. Another object changes the night. A lamp. A shallow stone vessel holds animal fat. A small wick sits in the fuel. The flame is modest. No bright beam cuts through the darkness. Instead, a soft yellow light trembles over nearby surfaces. Your eyes adjust. Suddenly you can work. Fine carving becomes possible after sunset. Needles can be used. Bindings can be repaired. Pigment can be prepared. Within caves, portable lamps may help people travel into chambers where daylight never reaches. Several Paleolithic stone lamps survive, some shaped specifically to contain fat. The concept is simple. Fat stores energy. A wick draws that fuel upward. Fire consumes it slowly. You've created controlled portable light. It smells faintly oily. Smoke rises. The flame flickers when someone passes. Yet darkness has lost some authority. The same is true of adhesives. Attaching a stone point to a wooden shaft is not always as simple as wrapping it with cord. Some prehistoric communities use compounds made from naturally available substances such as plant resins, birch tar, or ochre mixtures, depending on place and period. Producing some adhesives requires controlled heating. That means understanding materials at a surprisingly subtle level. Too hot and the substance may burn. Too cool and it may not process correctly. Mixing ingredients can alter strength or handling. You're performing chemistry without calling it chemistry. You know the result because generations of experiments have taught you what works. Scholars still argue whether some complex prehistoric adhesive technologies arise mainly through deliberate technical planning or through long traditions of practical trial that gradually become refined. The distinction is difficult to prove. Ancient craftspeople leave products, not explanations. Nobody scratches a note into the stone saying that today's resin batch was the result of 12 carefully controlled experiments. Knowledge can be highly sophisticated without being written or expressed in modern scientific language. You simply know that a certain bark behaves differently when heated. You know which mineral powder thickens a mixture. You know which binding loosens when wet. You know how long a point must cool before use. That knowledge lives in repeated action. Mistakes teach as effectively a success. A point detaches during use. You examine the failure. The next binding is tighter. A shaft snaps. You select different wood. A needle breaks near the eye. You make the next one thicker. A lamp smokes badly. You alter the wick. Innovation may look less like a sudden brilliant invention and more like thousands of small corrections. Generation after generation, those corrections accumulate. That is how a toolkit becomes reliable. You sit surrounded by objects now. Stone blades, bone points, a needle, prepared cord, a wooden shaft, a container, a lamp. Each item seems modest. Together they transform what your body can accomplish. You can cut faster, carry more, see in darkness, strike from greater distance, so fitted materials, process food efficiently, build with precision, repair damage, store useful substances. Technology does not make the Ice Age gentle. It makes you less limited by your natural anatomy. The remarkable part is that almost everything begins with materials found in the landscape. Stone, wood, bone, antler, fibre, hide, fat, resin, pigment. Nothing looks advanced while lying on the ground. Skill makes it advanced. You turn the stone blade once more in your hand. Its edge glints in the low light. Someone had to know where to find the rock, how to strike it, how to shape it, how to use it, how to teach those movements to someone else. That knowledge is the true tool. The object will eventually break. The skill survives in another pair of hands. Your knee aches before you fully wake. For a few moments you lie still, listening to the faint sounds around you. Someone shifts nearby. Wood gives a soft crack. Outside, wind brushes loose grit against the ground with a dry whisper. Then you move your leg. There it is again. A dull stiffness in the joint. Nothing dramatic, no terrible wound. Just the kind of persistent pain that reminds you how hard everyday Ice Age life can be on a human body. Survival is not always about escaping a predator or finding food in a desperate storm. Much of it is quieter. Sore backs, worn teeth, smoke-irritated eyes, cold fingers, cuts, bruises, infections, parasites, exhaustion, childbirth, the ordinary damage of being alive in a world without hospitals, antibiotics, pharmacies, or the comforting possibility of deciding that today should perhaps be spent entirely on the sofa. You sit up carefully. Your muscles complain. The body of an Ice Age adult may experience years of lifting, walking, carrying, scraping, digging, climbing, and kneeling. There are no ergonomic chairs, no supportive mattress promising revolutionary spinal alignment. If your work requires hours crouched over hides, stone, plant skin, or animal remains, your skeleton may eventually record the strain. Records confirm that prehistoric human remains often show healed injuries, arthritis, dental disease, and other signs of physical stress. Some individuals survive broken bones, others live with damaged joints. Teeth may be worn down severely. These are not signs that ancient people are constantly collapsing. They are signs that bodies accumulate history. Your skeleton remembers what you do. Repeated movement alters joints. A fracture leaves a scar in bone. A damaged tooth changes the way you chew. Over decades, everyday life writes itself into the body. You run your tongue across your teeth. Dental problems deserve special concern because there is no modern dentist waiting with a cheerful lamp and suspiciously calm music. A cracked tooth can become painful. Food can lodge inside damaged areas. Infection may follow. Heavy toothwear is common in many ancient populations, although patterns vary depending on diet and culture. Grit can enter food during processing. Hard particles wear enamel. Teeth may also be used as tools. You might grip higher with them, hold fibre, pull sinew, clamp an object while your hands perform another task. Useful, certainly. Kind to your teeth, less so. A curious footnote from prehistoric mouths is that tiny grooves sometimes appear on teeth in ways researchers interpret as repeated use of toothpicks or similar objects. Imagine that. You finish eating something stringy, a piece wedges between two teeth, several tens of thousands of years before mint-flavoured dental floss. You still find this irritating enough to do something about it. Humanity changes. Food trapped between teeth apparently does not. Other health problems leave almost no visible trace. A fever may kill without marking the skeleton. Respiratory illness may vanish archaeologically. Stomach infections leave little evidence. Skin problems disappear entirely. This means the illnesses visible to modern researchers represent only part of the true burden. You feel unwell one morning. Your head aches. Your limbs feel heavy. Perhaps you recover in a few days. Perhaps you do not. Nobody knows about bacteria or viruses in modern scientific terms, but people can recognize patterns. Someone coughing badly may be avoided. A wound that becomes swollen is alarming. Certain plants may be associated with relief from pain or stomach trouble. Warmth, rest, water, and particular foods can help with some illnesses even without understanding their biological cause. Practical medicine can exist without germ theory. People observe, this plant seems useful for pain, that substance soothes a wound. This illness spreads between people, that injury requires rest. Some knowledge is correct. Some is probably useless. Some may be harmful. This is not uniquely prehistoric. Humans remain perfectly capable of questionable health advice in every century. Smoke itself creates another problem. Fire offers warmth and light, but breathing smoke repeatedly can irritate lungs and eyes. In an enclosed living space, particles accumulate, your eyes sting, you cough. The smell settles into hair and skin. Ancient people do not necessarily spend every moment inside smoke-filled shelters, and ventilation varies, but frequent exposure almost certainly affects respiratory health. Researchers examining ancient remains sometimes look for evidence associated with long-term environmental stress. Though linking skeletal changes directly to smoke exposure can be difficult. Then there are parasites. These deserve far less cinematic attention than mammoths and perhaps far more historical respect. Lice, fleas, intestinal worms, ticks, other creatures that discover humans are warm, mobile, and regrettably edible. You scratch at your scalp. Someone beside you does the same. Parasites can cause irritation, blood loss, infection, and disease transmission. Clothing provides warmth, but also creates excellent hiding places for tiny unwanted guests. Bedding can harbour them. Close living increases opportunities for transmission. You clean garments when possible. You comb hair. You pick parasites from skin. Perhaps smoke discourages some of them. Perhaps certain plants are used as repellents. The battle is constant and profoundly undignified. One scandalous aside is that the evolutionary history of lice may contain clues about human clothing. Different lice specialize in different environments on the body, and genetic studies of clothing lice has been used to estimate when regular garment use becomes established. The exact dates remain disputed, but your least glamorous imaginary roommate has somehow become evidence in the history of technology. The lice would probably be unbearable company at dinner, but archaeologically they are unexpectedly informative. Far more visible dangers wait outside. Large carnivores share many Ice Age environments with humans. Lions, hyenas, wolves, bears, leopards in some regions. These animals are not monsters stalking every person continuously. Most predators prefer easier meals than alert groups of armed humans. Still, competition matters. Humans and carnivores may seek the same prey. They may use the same shelters. They may approach the same carcasses. A cave that looks wonderfully protected might already have an occupant with claws. You investigate carefully. Droppings, tracks, hair, bones, smell. All offer warnings. Entering blindly would be unwise. Cave bears, for example, use caves extensively in parts of Ice Age Europe. Their remains sometimes occur in enormous numbers. Humans may also use some of those caves, though not necessarily at the same time. The image of constant battles between humans and cave bears is more exciting than the evidence usually allows. Avoidance is generally preferable to combat. You do not prove bravery by fighting an enormous bear when walking somewhere else is available. Wolves present a different relationship. They compete for prey and may approach human sites. At some point, relationships between humans and certain wolf populations begin changing in ways that eventually lead to dogs. Exactly how and when this process unfolds remains complicated. No agreement has been reached on whether early domestication begins mainly because wolves approach human camps for scraps, because humans deliberately raise wolf pups, or through several interacting pathways. Genetic and archaeological evidence continue to generate debate over dates and locations. Whatever the beginning, it represents a remarkable shift. A competitor gradually becomes a companion. But for much of the Ice Age, the boundary between useful proximity and dangerous encounter may remain uncertain. The landscape itself causes just as many problems as animals. Ice hides uneven ground. River crossings become treacherous. Snow conceals holes. Loose rock shifts beneath your feet. A small mistake can become a serious injury. You test the ground before placing full weight on it. You avoid slopes that look unstable. You listen for cracking ice. You watch how animals cross. Experience teaches caution. Still, accidents happen. A fall twists your ankle. You cut your palm while shaping stone. A splinter enters a finger. A burning ember lands against skin. Someone carrying a heavy load strains a shoulder. The injuries sound trivial until you remember there is no emergency room. Wound care therefore matters. You wash away dirt if clean water is available. You apply pressure to bleeding. You cover damaged skin. Plant materials, fat, resinous substances, or other compounds may sometimes be used. Though reconstructing prehistoric medicine is difficult, some treatments may help accidentally through antimicrobial or protective properties, others may work mainly by keeping dirt away, and some probably do absolutely nothing while everyone remains convinced otherwise. Human tradition is capable of preserving wisdom and nonsense with equal enthusiasm. Childbirth introduces another profound danger. For an Ice Age mother, pregnancy already changes mobility and energy requirements. Labour can become life-threatening. Human babies have large heads relative to the birth canal, and childbirth is unusually difficult compared with many other mammals. Assistance from other people may therefore be especially important. You can imagine women supporting one another through labour, drawing on accumulated experience. Someone recognises the progression. Someone brings water, someone helps position the mother, someone receives the infant, someone deals with complications as best they can. Direct archaeological evidence for birth practices is extremely rare. So much remains uncertain, but social birth assistance is widespread among later human communities and likely has deep roots. A successful birth does not end the challenge. The newborn must stay warm. It must feed frequently. The mother needs recovery. If she becomes ill, other caregivers become crucial. A baby's survival depends on a social network immediately. Infant mortality is likely high by modern standards, though estimating precise rates for many Paleolithic populations is difficult. Burials of children remind you that not every family story ends happily. Yet the existence of elaborate treatment for some young individuals also shows emotional investment. Children are not disposable because life is harsh. They are valued precisely because life continues through them. You step outside into morning air. Cold bites at the inside of your nose. A bruise along your thigh has turned dark. Your knee remains stiff. Your teeth are not perfect. There is a healing cut across one finger. None of these things prevents you from functioning today. That is another side of resilience. You do not need to be physically flawless. You need to remain capable enough, supported enough, and cautious enough to continue. Ancient survival is often portrayed as a constant filter, removing anyone weak. The skeletons tell a more complicated story. People endure injuries, people age, people live with limitations. Some receive help long enough to heal. Hardship does not erase care, nor does care erase hardship. Both exist together. You learn which pains can be ignored, which wounds require attention, which cough sounds dangerous, when someone needs rest, when a child must be carried, when a river is too risky, when an unfamiliar animal track should change your route. Survival becomes thousands of small judgments. Most are never dramatic enough to become stories. That is probably why they matter so much. Evening will find you tired again. Your back may ache. Smoke may sting your eyes. A mosquito, if the season permits, may discover the one exposed patch of skin available in the entire landscape. You will scratch it irritably, perhaps mutter something prehistoric and unprintable, and continue. Because resilience is not a heroic moment. It is waking with a sore knee and still getting up. It is cleaning a cut, helping someone walk, softening food for aching teeth, watching a fever, avoiding thin ice, carrying a tired child, and repeating these ordinary acts until another day has been survived. The cold does not simply end. There is no morning when you wake, step outside, and discover that the Ice Age has politely packed its glaciers away during the night. Change arrives unevenly. A winter feels slightly shorter. A valley holds snow for fewer weeks. Shrubs appear where open grass once dominates. Trees begin moving into regions that have remained treeless for generations. Animals alter their routes. Streams swell with meltwater. The world you understand is slowly becoming another world. For people living through these changes, warming is not automatically good news. Modern imagination can make the retreat of ice sound like an obvious improvement. Less freezing weather, more plants. Perhaps fewer evenings spent wondering whether your toes are still emotionally committed to the rest of your body. But survival depends on familiarity. When the environment changes, old knowledge becomes less reliable. A hunting place used for generations may lose the animals that made it useful. A familiar crossing floods. Open grassland becomes woodland. Some species decline, others spread. The great lesson of the closing Ice Age is that humans must adapt yet again. Records confirm that the last major glacial period gives way to much warmer conditions as the planet enters the Holocene, beginning roughly 11,700 years ago. The transition transforms enormous areas. Ice sheets retreat, sea levels rise, vegetation changes, habitats move northward. The geography of daily life shifts. You stand beside a broad river swollen by seasonal melt. Water carries branches and sediment downstream. The banks feel unstable beneath your feet. Beyond them, young trees grow across land where open steppe once offered long views. This new woodland creates opportunities. It also creates problems. Large herds are harder to see among trees. Hunting strategies suited to open country may become less effective. Animals adapted to cold grasslands retreat or disappear from some regions. reindeer move northward in much of Europe. Woolly mammoths vanish from most of their former range. Woolly rhinoceroses disappear entirely. The exact timing varies from place to place. You cannot simply continue doing precisely what your grandparents did. You need new habits. Smaller animals become increasingly important in many regions. Deer move through woodland. Wild boar forage among trees. Rabbits and other small game can contribute food. Rivers and lakes support fish. Wetlands attract birds. Plant resources diversify. Hazelnuts, acorns, fruits, seeds, roots, and other foods become significant depending on the location. Instead of watching a vast herd cross an open plain, you may spend more time moving through enclosed landscapes. Sound becomes more useful. A branch snaps somewhere ahead. Leaves rustle. Bird calls change when something passes below them. The forest conceals what the steppe once displayed openly. You adapt your senses. Tools change too. Smaller stone implements become common in many post-glacial traditions. Tiny blades or points can be mounted into wooden or bone shafts to create composite arrows, knives, or other equipment. The bow becomes increasingly important in many regions. Compared with a heavy spear, an arrow can travel quickly through woodland openings. Several arrows are easier to carry. A hunter can respond to smaller, faster animals. Technology follows the environment. A tool is useful only if it solves the problem in front of you. Wetlands create other possibilities. You travel by water more often. Rivers that once feel like barriers become routes. Wooden boats, dugout canoes, paddles, fish traps, and nets leave uneven archaeological traces. But surviving examples from early post-glacial contexts show increasingly intensive relationships with lakes and rivers. You learn to read currents. You know where fish gather. You understand when seasonal runs begin. A lake can provide food without requiring long journeys across open country. That can encourage people to remain in one place longer. Not everywhere, not always. But the rhythm of movement begins changing. Some camps become more substantial. Certain locations are visited repeatedly. Food storage becomes increasingly important where seasonal abundance allows it. If a river delivers large numbers of fish for a short period, preserving them can support people afterward. If nuts ripen in autumn, gathering large quantities rewards planning. Abundance becomes something you can organize. This is a subtle transformation. Instead of only following your resources across the landscape, you increasingly reshape your schedule around places where predictable resources return. You become attached to particular rivers, coastlines, wetlands, forests, and seasonal gathering grounds. A curious footnote appears along some ancient shorelines, where generations of people leave enormous piles of shells, animal bones, charcoal, broken tools, and other debris. These middens may grow into substantial features. To you, it is simply the accumulation of meals and daily work. To a future archaeologist, your rubbish becomes a treasure chest. There is something quietly amusing about that. Throw away dinner scraps carefully enough, and several thousand years later, someone may build an academic career around them. Sea level rise creates a far less amusing challenge. As glaciers melt, oceans expand across low-lying plains. Land that people once walk across disappears beneath water. Coastlines shift inward. Habitations must move. Estuaries change. Freshwater sources become salty. Travel routes vanish. Some communities adapt by moving gradually with the shore. Others abandon landscapes that have been familiar for generations. Imagine watching the sea advance across a place associated with childhood. A grove disappears. A path becomes tidal. An old campsite lies beyond the new shoreline. No single day feels like catastrophe. Year by year, however, the map changes. This helps explain why so much evidence of early coastal life is now underwater. Entire human landscapes have been erased from ordinary view. climate warming can also be unstable. The general direction is toward warmer conditions, but sudden reversals occur. One famous episode, the Younger Dryas, brings a return to colder conditions across parts of the Northern Hemisphere near the end of the glacial period. For communities living through it, this means adaptation is not a straight path. You adjust to warming, then cold returns, then warming resumes. Your expectations must remain flexible. That flexibility has become one of humanity's greatest strengths. Scholars still argue whether abrupt climate changes near the end of the Ice Age directly encourage major social transformations, including experiments with more settled life and eventually food production, or whether population growth, cultural choices, local ecology, and many other pressures matter more. There is no single global explanation. Agriculture does not appear everywhere at once, nor does every hunter-gatherer community suddenly decide that planting grain sounds delightful. In some regions, people continue hunting, gathering, fishing, and moving seasonally for thousands of years. In others, communities increasingly manage plants and animals. The transition toward farming begins through many local decisions rather than one universal invention. You can almost feel how gradual it is. Someone protects a useful patch of plants. Someone scatters seeds near a camp. People notice that particular grasses grow well in disturbed soil. Certain animals linger near human settlements. Patterns repeat, knowledge builds. Eventually, in some regions, relationships with plants and animals become intensive enough to transform entire societies. Permanent villages appear. Stored food becomes more important. Populations can grow. Property becomes more complicated. So do social disputes, because apparently increased food storage also invents the timeless problem of wondering who took more than their share. Yet none of this means the Ice Age way of life simply disappears. The skills developed during cold millennia remain deeply embedded in humanity. Observation, cooperation, planning, toolmaking, teaching, long-distance exchange, flexible diets, landscape knowledge, care for children and injured companions. These abilities continue regardless of whether people later farm, herd animals, fish, trade, or build towns. The Ice Age does not create one magical survival technique. It rewards a package of behaviors, and the most powerful behavior may be the ability to change behavior itself. You do not survive because your species is perfectly adapted to one environment. You survive because you are never entirely dependent on one environment. Humans occupy cold plains, forests, coasts, deserts, mountains, river valleys, tropical regions. The same basic body enters radically different worlds and compensates with culture. That is unusual. A mammoth carries its insulation on its body. You manufacture yours. A predator depends heavily on inherited hunting behavior. You teach techniques. An animal may follow instinctive migration routes. You can decide that the familiar route no longer works and invent another. Culture changes faster than genes. That speed becomes decisive when climate changes within human lifetimes. One scandalous aside is that the end of the Ice Age does not necessarily make daily life easier. New forests bring biting insects. Wetlands create clouds of mosquitoes. Warmer climates expand habitats for certain parasites. Food may become more varied, but some resources are harder to predict. Settling longer in one place can increase waste, disease transmission, and conflict. Progress, as usual, refuses to travel in a neat straight line. You gain one comfort and acquire 3 new inconveniences. Still, communities continue experimenting. That willingness is the lasting story. Now evening settles over a landscape no longer dominated by bitter open cold. Trees stand dark against a softer sky. Water reflects the last light. Somewhere nearby, a bird calls from the reeds. The air smells of wet earth and leaves. You can hear insects, a small irritation, certainly, but also evidence that the season has changed. You sit quietly and allow the long human journey to soften around you. There is no need to chase the final answer. No single invention saves humanity. No solitary hero carries everyone through the cold. Survival comes from countless ordinary choices made well enough, often enough, for one more generation to grow. A hand teaches another hand to shape stone. A parent carries a child. Someone notices the river rising. Someone shares food. Someone changes the route. Someone remembers where the animals went. The great glaciers retreat into distance. Their edges melt. Rivers widen. Grasslands shift. Forests spread slowly across the horizon. And you remain here, breathing quietly beneath a darkening sky, surrounded by the gentle evidence of adaptation. The world changes. You change with it. The night grows softer now. The sounds become farther apart. Water moves calmly somewhere beyond the trees, and the last light fades until the landscape becomes only shape and shadow. There is nothing more you need to follow, nothing more you need to remember tonight. The long cold has passed into memory. The footsteps across frozen ground have become faint. Voices settle. The river keeps moving. You can allow the distant landscape to blur at its edges, as though mist is crossing slowly between you and the ancient world. Your breathing finds its own easy rhythm. The darkness feels warm rather than empty, and somewhere beyond imagination, generations of human footsteps continue quietly into morning. For now, you can leave them there. The fire is low. The world is still, and it is safe to sleep.